Welcome back to CheloniaCast Season 2. Kick things off. We got Cris Hagen, world-renowned turtle aficionado and director of animal management at the Turtle Survival Center. I'll hand it to you, Jack.
All right, so Cris and turtles. That's a classic question we always start with.
Yeah, well, I don't, not sure there was a time where I wasn't really interested in turtles. You know, as soon as I could start kind of thinking for myself and noticing the outside world, just always been there. Reptiles, amphibians, herpetology in general, and paleontology and habitats and just natural history of everything. Really, I was always interested in, about 4 to 5 years old in that range. And I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, and it was in Columbus a little bit. Or I was born in Dayton and mostly grew up in Dayton, but I was in Columbus when I was about 4 years old, 3 and 4 years old for a little while. And we lived near the Columbus Zoo. My mother would take me there a lot, and Columbus Zoo had a huge turtle collection, of course, back then. And but along the river, we lived near a river, and I found the bones of a turtle. I don't remember what kind of turtle it was, if it was a map turtle or what. I don't recall, but I did find the skeleton of a turtle, and that's always been imprinted in my mind. And so yeah, just turtles, and everything. I mean, natural history in general. I do consider myself, always have a generalist naturalist to everything in the universe, but I am these days pretty hyper focused on turtles, of course.
I think it's a pretty similar story for a lot of us. I mean, I remember being 4 or 5 years old, finding box turtles in my backyard and just totally enamored with them. And it just kind of grew from there. I would go down to the creek and catch everything, snakes, turtles, and frogs, and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
Similar story to Jason, too, coming from Ohio and getting interested.
Yes. Ohio follows you everywhere. There's no escaping it. It's a breeding ground for humans.
Unfortunately.
So, well, yes.
Everyone's born here. No one wants to stay.
That's correct. I left Ohio in 1997.
Hoping to leave once I finish school here, so I can't blame you on that one. I guess like to get into things here. Could you speak to like your career pathway to like the position you are currently in?
Sure.
Your time at like SREL and how you got to where you're at today.
Yeah, I guess I'm really fortunate. Starting like growing up in Ohio. I mean, Ohio has a very rich history of herpetology. I was involved with my local Museum of Natural History and the Dayton Herpetological Society by 1983 or 3, I believe. I was 11 years old. I was teaching environmental education, as a volunteer during like programs with herpetology and stuff like that. So I just always been involved in that. And I've, back then, this was in the early mid 80s. I mean, most people didn't even know what the word herpetology was. And if you did work with amphibians and reptiles, you were quite strange generally. And that is kind of true. Yes. But, it was just, I was immersed in it all the time. I belonged to the Cincinnati Herp Society, the Columbus Herp Society, NOAA, the Northern Ohio Association of Herpetologists, Toledo. And I would just catch rides with people. I mean, again, I'm 12 years old, and it was just a different time. There wasn't much safety concern. You just kind of we were just kind of feral, kids back then, doing whatever we wanted. And we get in car, our parents didn't care, getting in cars with people that are 10, 12, 15 years old guys, snake guys or whatever. And we're going to a herp meeting or going down to South Carolina to go herping and catching stuff or whatever. And it was just never an issue. So I was involved with that a lot very early on. And when I was about 12 years old, I met Jim Harrison, who's the owner and director of the Kentucky Reptile Zoo. Before he was at that location, it was the Miami Valley Serpentarium in Ohio, in Dayton, Ohio, and it was more of a traveling facility. We'd go to festivals, carnivals, whatever, and do interpretation, teach people about snakes and reptiles, and so I was heavily involved with that very early on when he started that, and again with the Dayton Herp Society. And it's just what I've always done. I never even thought about, pursuing it as a career, because it's just what I do. It was never like a career goal, because it was, again, that's all I did. It was one of the main things that I did. And I've never really had to do anything else but herpetology. And I did eventually go to school and formalize my knowledge with a degree, because I was actually teaching at a college before I had any type of degree, teaching herpetology at a college in southeastern Ohio, called Hocking College near OU. Hung out there for a couple of years, and then went out west to Washington State and got my bachelor's of science there at a school in Olympia, Washington, where I did a lot of work with amphibians. And then I did a lot of work with amphibians after that as well for many years, kind of gypsy biology, just seasonal positions around the country. Worked in Hawaii, in Hawaii Volcanoes National Park on Hawksbill turtles for 8 or 9 months one year, 99, I believe. And worked in the Smoky Mountain National Park, in the Columbia River Gorge, again with salamanders. If turtles and crocodilians didn't exist, I would definitely be a salamander person, a biologist. I am, but I don't really focus on them. I have a strong interest in them. Then I went to Borneo for a while. I was going to work with Indranil Das. I was going to do a master's degree at the University of Malaysia, Sarawak, and this was in 2002, because I had just left the Santa Barbara Zoo. I was there for a couple of years as well, working as the herpetologist there in California, and then went to Borneo, was there spent like 3 or 4 weeks with Neil, I think about 3 weeks with Neil Das, and we just kind of came to the conclusion that we would never find enough turtles to make a worthy master's project out of it. So from there, I just went traveling through Indonesia for a few months. I went looking for, the first time I saw Yuanawai in the wild was in 2002, and down to Komodo again. I'd been there before, but I wanted to go again, and just seeing some of the farther eastern islands, and then ended up back in Hawaii and was just kind of bumming around on Waikiki area, because that's where my girlfriend's grandmother lived and at the time, and we walked down to the internet cafe and searched for jobs on Texas A&M website, on the job board, and everywhere else that I could, and found this position at the Savannah River Ecology Lab. And I always knew I would live in the Southeast eventually, like kind of end up here. I just wanted to go do everything else first, live in Alaska, Hawaii, the West Coast, even the Northeast a little bit. And then did eventually, I got this job after applying from Hawaii. I got an SRL working in the genetics lab, which I've never done microbiology really, other than in school a little bit. So, but that was a time where there were a lot more papers coming out, and I'm really into taxonomy and biogeography, and so genetics were coming into play much more. It wasn't just morphology and geography. We were looking at genetics now to describe species, and so I didn't know a lot about it. I did take genetics courses in college, like I mentioned, but I wanted to learn about it firsthand. So I took this position because it did have an alligator component to it. So I'm a crocodilian biologist too. So it was cool. I was going to learn about genetics, and the specific position was developing microsatellite primers. And I did that for 11 years, but also did field work with American alligators, a little bit with turtles, and working. And of course, I knew Kurt Buhlman and Tracy and Whit Gibbons. I mean, all this turtle knowledge under one roof, just such a rarity to be there. So it was a dream job for me, just working gel jockey by day, alligator, research at night, and fishing, and because we're catching bass and taking blood samples as well, and on an unfished lake. I mean, any fisherman would love to fish that lake. But and so there for 11 years, and always with the TSA, of course, going back to 2001 when the organization was formed. I was a founding member of the TSA, so always involved. And through all that time, I'm still maintaining assurance colonies at SREL. It was never part of my job or Kurt's job or Witt's job. We just did it. And no one stopped us from doing it, really. And it was a program of sorts. And we worked the best we could, but we just did it basically in our free time. But we had hundreds, and we had well over 1,000 turtles there. And then the lab was shutting down in 2007 or 8, and then it didn't. And it went from like over 200 people down to 35 skeleton crew. I was lucky to not get laid off because all of my salary came from outside funding, because we did a semi-commercial business of developing microsatellite primers for people all over the world. So I have over 300 types of plants and animals I've developed primers for, including, I think, for turtles, I did Batagur trivittata, based on the one animal that Maurice now has that came out of the New York collection. So I took a blood sample from that back in like 2006 or 7, and we developed primers from that and cross-amplified them across Borneoensis and Affinis, and I think those are that's still being used today, to this day. So, and then again, at the same time, I'm lobbying the TSA, like we need an animal management coordinator or manager. There was never funds for that type of thing, but then eventually it did happen. And in 2010, I became the director of animal management for the TSA. And for 3 years, from 2010 until 2013, I did both jobs full time, both my job at SREL and I just kept my office there. I did everything for the TSA out of the University of Georgia, SREL, in South Carolina. And then this facility became available from a friend of mine who had built it as a crocodile conservation center. He offered it to me to use and just to keep turtles at, because he went through a divorce and a lot of the animals had been moved already. And I basically took that and developed a plan and presented it to the TSA board of directors. And we went forward with purchasing the facility and developing a captive breeding center like the TSA has always wanted. It's just been difficult to secure the funds, the place, the animals, all that stuff. I had the animals, I had access to the animals outside of what I didn't have. And then this place, and it was for the right price at the time. And so we did it. And, I am the longest running employee of the TSA. I was, in a sense, the first paid employee of the TSA, because Heather Lowe was hired before me, about 8 months or 9 months before me, but the TSA never actually paid her. She was paid through, she was a Fort Worth Zoo employee the whole time, even though she just basically did TSA work. And then in 2020, my title shifted from Director of Animal Management to Director of the Turtle Survival Center. And, over the years, I've watched it, the first 8 or so years of the TSA, no employees at all, volunteer run, to just Heather and I until 2013. And then when we opened the center, we started hiring, more staff for the center, and then office staff, moving the office from Fort Worth to Charleston, South Carolina. And now, as of right now, I think we're up to 16 employees, if I'm remembering correctly, as of just in the past week or two. So and we have the most employees here at the center that we've ever had. We're up to 7 full-time staff members at the moment. And so it's kind of the short version of how I got here, and a lot of other little stuff in between, but mostly herpetology work the whole way through. I've had a couple of non-animal related positions for very brief periods of time in my life, but almost always herpetology.
What kind of work were you doing with the hawksbills in Hawaii, like specifically? That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, so it was a monitoring program that they started, I believe, in, geez, I can't remember what year. It was the early 90s, I believe. And on the Big Island, because I believe they've been found nesting on Maui as well. I think Maui and Hawaii, the Big Island, are the only two islands they nest on. And, there are green turtles everywhere. Colonia mitis. I mean, everyone, that's what you see everywhere there. But those turtles don't nest on the 9 main islands. They nest up in the French frigate shoals. They don't nest there. Only the hawksbills nest, and they're solitary nesters, if you know. And so there are only like 55 or 60 nesting females in all of Hawaii, or at least there was back then. There might be more now. So we would go out on these remote beaches in the park. We have to hike anywhere from like 6, 9, 12 miles. And we'd stay out there for like 4 or 5 days at a time and just patrol the beaches all night and tag turtles, monitor nests, protect nests from introduced predators like mongoose, rats, cats, pigs, those kind of things. We had a few beaches off out of the national park that we worked at as well. That were it was always a good time. But yeah, it's just a long-term monitoring program, again, tagging and taking down egg data and hatchling data, all that, the normal stuff.
That's cool. You don't see so much crossover between freshwater turtles and sea turtles as much, but that sounds like some really interesting work.
Yeah, it was great.
And so going to the SREL, you said you were mostly working kind of in the lab there. Where I assume just being there, you were also kind of vicariously or directly involved with the work that was going on at the sort of in the wilderness there too. What was that like to see that sort of the scale of that project?
Absolutely incredible. I mean, just this ecological playground, one of the biggest herpetological centers on the planet in terms of the number of people, the legacy, the number of people have come through there since the late 60s that have gone on to become professors or working in wildlife agencies and stuff like that. And it's just to this day, I still see these people and hang out with these people from 20 years ago. People that I've watched, people like Parker Gibbon. I've watched him grow up in the marsh on Kiowa, since he was a child, and catching terrapins with him and his dad and his grandfather. And we still do, we will be doing it again in 3 months. And, more than 20 years of doing that. It's just, incredible stuff. But yeah, back to the Savannah River site, 310 square miles, I think more than 1% of the state of South Carolina. It's all these habitat types, 103 or 4 species of herps identified on that site. And when when Witt was real active, and I saw the tail end of his, his career there before he retired, and his last couple cohorts of students, of masters and PhD students. And just amazing when you have this team of dedicated herpetology students going out trapping, working on all kinds of snakes, sirens, all the different taxa, and just getting to see all that, going out on their projects, helping at times, and all the really just so many animals that you got to see, and the amounts of them if you were there at the right time. When like Seminatrix, the black swamp snake, where they would come out by the thousands and thousands. Or I believe it was in 2004, one of the greatest things I've ever seen is after a long drought that had been in South Carolina, Ellington Bay, all these Carolina bays, these seasonal wetlands, they're enclosed by drift fences. And that the drought broke that year, and millions and millions of amphibians came out. They're just everywhere. You could not walk through the forest without stepping on toadlets and leopard frog metamorphs. We had, there's 140 some buckets around this drift fence. And by the time, and I think it was about, I can't remember how far it was or how long it was, but it was a good ways, quarter mile or more. And by the time you got back to the end, the buckets will be filled again. You're dip netting and estimating counts, but a paper was written. It has like 30 authors on it because all the people that worked on it. We had to run that drift fence 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, while it was active, because so many animals were being collected in these buckets. And that was just a really unique experience I'll probably never see again in my life, but yeah, and working on those lakes, all the neat stuff that you see out there, all the fish, the amphibians, the turtles, and the alligators. And most of the alligator work we did was looking at population genetics and heavy metals accumulation.
That's really cool stuff. That site is incredible. I've never been, but I've heard so much about it. And I think in the ecology of the slider, they did a calculation for how many miles were walked around those drift fences. Yes. And it was easily in the thousands. So to hear about someone who had the perspective of actually going to do that, that's incredible. They would just
it was really neat. I mean, I helped build some of the first penning fences for the translocated tortoises when I first got there, that Kurt and Tracy did. And yeah, so I mean, that was all fun stuff. And the Aiken Gopher Tortoise Preserve, seeing that in the very beginnings, the early stages of it anyway. Now that, there were like a handful of animals. Now there's over 1,000 on that property. So many neat things, and all the, things like coral snakes and pine snakes and pygmy rattlesnakes and southern hognose and all the weird albinos things that were found on the site while we were there. Yeah, I mean, every day, all the time. It was really, really cool. There's always stuff going on.
Right. That's incredible. So you had mentioned kind of and that's a cool perspective to have, but specifically Sulawesi, that's one where you've spent a good deal of time and specifically working with the Sulawesi forest turtle. That's a really cool. Jack and I actually got a lot of some experience with those this summer at the Turtle Conservancy. They've got some there, so we got to see a lot of those. But what's it like? I mean, I guess, why are those turtles unique? There's some cool history behind that, but and also kind of what is it like to see them in the wild and to work with them?
Well, it's all really neat if you love turtles, or if you're into turtles. It's just they were described, obviously, in 1995. A good friend of mine, Tom Ockrey, I met him in like 2002 or 3, I believe, at SREL. He was coming down to do a postdoc. And we're just talking about stuff, and he did the measurements for him in John Iverson's driveway in Indiana, for the description of them when he was a student of Iverson's, an undergraduate student. So, just some of that neat history of the people involved and how they came to be. And really, in my mind, it's one of the, if not the kind of like last, like, real turtle discoveries. Yes, we're describing species all the time, but most of them are based on genetics or little, subpopulations or controversial stuff. And they all look, but this is a really unique turtle in terms of, I mean, no, it's a geomyid. I mean, it's similar to other turtles, of course, but it's in 5 years it was just its name changed. Genus changed 3 times. It started as Geomyida uonoi. And, people for many years were thinking, oh, maybe it's more higher elevation, it needs to be kept cool like a spangler eye, this kind of thing. It turns out not to be the case, of course, because there was so much difficulty keeping them alive in the beginning, breeding them, getting the eggs to hatch, all that kind of stuff. Well, it still is hard to get the eggs to hatch. So described in 95, went from Geomyida to Hyosemes and then to the monotypic genus Leucocephalon. They were, collected by Frank Uono, who they're named after, a tropical fish dealer in Indonesia who purchased the first specimens in a little town outside, most likely outside of the range of the turtle up in northern Sulawesi called Gorontalo. And then, of course, Bill McCord and Iverson described them through market specimens. They first started showing up probably in the very late 80s or early 90s in Chinese markets, and that's how people started getting their hands on them and then tracking them down where these things come from. But then, Steve Platt was the first person to see them in the wild. First foreigner. Obviously, locals had seen these animals, and people that I interviewed there that were traders had said that they had been locally trading them since the late 70s, at least, but they didn't start, I guess, making it abroad until late 80s or early 90s at best.
Why is it that they went under the radar for so long? I mean, they didn't make it into the global market until the late 80s, I guess, like you said. But why is it that no one prior to that? I mean, people all the way back to 16th century were kind of exploring that area. What?
I know. They just didn't go to the right place, I guess. They weren't traded probably in large numbers at all. Or at all in some cases, and it's probably very minimal because there wasn't a demand really for them. They don't make good pets at all, in general. They're nasty turtles in terms of scratching and biting and spraying feces all over you. They're big, tropical, they're aggressive, they're hard to keep alive, they fight, they're hard to breed, all that stuff. So they apparently they don't taste good. That's anecdotally, that's what I'm told. So people aren't fond of eating them. Nobody locally eats them that I've found. They only collect them because people come by to buy them, the middlemen type people, traders, and send them to, it used to be off around the world. Now there's still a huge trade in them within Indonesia for some reason, going primarily to the pet markets on the island of Java, and to the reptile collectors within Indonesia. You see very few actually leaving the country, but there's still hundreds being collected, and I don't understand why there's such a demand for them. You can kind of understand why there's more, there's a demand for Forstens, but not really Yuanawai. But just a really neat turtle. So Steve saw him first, and I read his article, and I've been wanting to do it, and this was in 2002. The first time I saw them actually was in 1998 on my first trip to Indonesia, but I saw them. Somebody had one in Bali, a female. I have a picture of it. And that was the first one that I ever saw. But then I was in Borneo in 2002, trying to work with Indranil Das. And when that didn't work out, I went through, I was hanging out in Sarawak in Malaysia and Borneo, then in Sabah, went down to the Danum Valley. I tried to look for like Dogania and Amboinensis and Emmys, and then skipped over, I think illegally, I can't remember how we got over the border into Kalimantan, the Indonesian part of the island. And then I got on a plane and flew over to Sulawesi. And just went there. This was in 2002. Internet hadn't been around that long, really, and didn't have any connection there at all. And you could go to an internet cafe, but it was like half an hour or more sometimes to send a single email, just with the dial-up and the slow connections. And so we did that. I did that and somehow got lucky and found the guy in the town of Palu. I knew they were in central Sulawesi, so I went to Palu and I found the main kind of trader there. And spent all day at his house. He didn't speak much English. I speak a little bit of Indonesian, and but we spent the day drinking coffee and beer and eating and talking. He had turtles at his house. He, of course, had red-eared sliders. He had Forstens. He had Ambos, and he had Yuanawai. And after like 8 or 10 hours at his house, he's like, "Oh, you want to go see some in the wild?" And I went, "Yes, of course." And I'd already been up for like 24 hours at this point. So we get in the car and we start going. We stop and buy some supplies. Little did I know, and we're driving all the way up the central arm of the peninsula there, or of central Sulawesi. And 12 hours later, we arrive in this little village. We've been delayed by multiple things along the way. It's at night. we get there, and by this time we've been up for like almost, a day and a half or so. And we get there, it's after dark, and then we just start hiking into the forest. Arrive in a village in the middle of remote Sulawesi, and then we start hiking, probably like 4 kilometers or so before we get to this tiny little stream, and then we start finding turtles. And of course, the first one was a juvenile that we had found, probably no more than 4 inches or so, and that was exciting. And then the next one was a female, and then we found a male and a female together. And I was kind of delirious at this point, and I was just wearing sandals and hiking up these rocky streams. I'd fallen a couple of times. I was getting kind of scratched up. And we're also like seeing like snake cobras and other water snakes and catching all kinds of other little toads and sort of like the Celebesi toad and all kinds of neat stuff like that. And but yeah, I mean, it was super exciting, just going on adrenaline, of course. And for the love of going out and seeing these turtles, taking some water temperatures, taking some notes on the habitat and that kind of thing. So yeah, it was really, really exciting. These people were collectors. It was at the very tail end of the legal collection of them. So they were still being collected legally in a way. I mean, Indonesia has all these laws, so I don't know if they ever really legally collected, because technically you need a permit just to transfer things from island to island, or a permission to do that. So regardless, it was in 2002 when they put forth a 0 export quota for the species, but obviously they're still being traded. But yeah, that was really a really momentous time in my life, finding that turtle in the wild, and all it took to get there and do it.
What do the collectors think about you coming in and asking them to take you out? That sort of thing. How does that go over?
Usually quite well. I mean, I've had in Sulawesi, they loved it. People just like seeing foreigners. They tend to, you want to bring extra stuff because they want stuff from a foreign land, so
right,
whether it be T-shirts or books or, I've gone back like 10 years later and talking to people, and they still have like a letter or something that you gave them, or, that they really like. But yeah, they're always excited to meet people, and in my travels anyway, they're like, yeah, let's go do it. They might have some other motive for wanting to go out. They work in the forest anyway. They might, like in Papua New Guinea, it's, we're going out at night trying to trap turtles, sea turtle, snake necks, and Emidora and Elsea, but their real prerogative is hunting deer. We got to find deer and hunt the deer, but we'll take you guys out and look for turtles too, but they're, I've never ran into any real issues. One time on Rhode Island, my first trip there in 2004, I believe it was. Yes, 2004. It was after the Croc meetings in Darwin, Australia. I hopped over to Timor and got over to Rhode and went out, and we went to this remote village. Now, not many people ever went to Rhode except for some Australians to go on one end of the island. There's a surf spot, that's, other than that, no one has any reason to go there. We get up into this village, and most of the people there, except for a few of the oldest people in passing, had seen foreigners before, but no one else had. No electricity. They were all pretty terrified that I was there. They didn't know what was going on, why I was there, and why someone would be in their village looking for turtle. This foreigner, the 6-foot-tall foreigner, looking for turtles. It was just really strange to them. They thought I was coming to the chief of the village was not there. They thought I was coming to arrest him or something. So I was confined to the chief's hut, his quarters, for I think it was a day and a half or so before he returned. And then we sat down and discussed things. And he had an old typewriter that he would he'd type things out by candlelight. And like I said, no running water, just kids naked everywhere, as soon as they go to the bathroom on the ground, and the dogs that are around the village would just come and eat it right off the ground as soon as it hit the ground. But by the third day, I was being invited to a birthing ceremony, and where I ate this just kind of congealed, it was like blocky, soupy buffalo fat that was cold and had this flies all over it, and it was hard to stomach, but I managed to get a little bit of it down, but not what I normally like to eat. And all the betel nut, the betel nut, they put their lip, and they're just everything. There's the red spit that's everywhere. And I sat in the hut one night with all the elder villagers, and they passed around the little thing to you put you mix the lime and the betel nut together, and it just burns the hell out of your lip and your gum. But yeah, and of course going out and looking for snake neck turtles.
So you were looking for the Rhode Island snake necks there.
Yep.
That was sort of that's got another kind of unique story in terms of the exploitation and such. What did you end up finding them there, or what's?
Yeah, supposedly, I have the distinction of seeing the last 3 Chelodina McCordi ever in the wild. No one else has found one since. We saw 3 when I was there, and again, they tell the people that work in Indonesia. I gave a talk at the TSA meeting a few years ago about Rhode Island, and it was more about breeding the snake necks here. But I put in some photos of my travels there and showed the pictures of those 3 animals that I saw when I was there. And an Indonesian biologist, I can't remember his name right now off the top of my head, unfortunately, but he came up to me afterwards and said those were the last 3 that anyone's known about. Those are the last ones. And so that was in 2004. But yeah, they were, not described. They were described in 94. What's funny is, they were being bred in captivity a long time before they were described. They were always exported as New Guinea snake neck turtles. But turtle keepers, aficionados, could see that this is a different animal. This isn't a New Guinea snake neck turtle. Still to this day, there aren't many people that know the difference between, the different snake necks, unless they're, have special features to them, characteristics. And so they were being exported as fish, because that's all they were. That's what turtles were categorized as in Indonesia for a long, long time, until, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 years ago. Not even, I think less than that. Anyway, so they were being exported as fish, a little bit for the pet trade. They're going to Japan, China, US, Europe. But they just have, it's such a small island. It's a tiny little island, and there's only so much fresh water. There's seasonal lakes up in a plateau region. There's on the eastern end, all the bigger lakes, that Brian and WCS and everyone are working on for the reintroduction. And Brian Horn, I'm sure you know who that is. And I know you know who that is. And then on the eastern end of the island, there are, some streams and some impoundment areas where they are said to occur. People there, all the people that I talked to there when I was there in the early 2000s, so they don't really care for them. But in general, people are taught that reptiles are nasty, horrible things, and to kill it on sight. In fact, one of the turtles that I saw had old machete wounds on it, like deep cut machete wounds on it that were healed up. One of them did. One was a juvenile and 2 adult females. And but it was really, really interesting. And I met one of the guys who had collected a lot of them, and I stayed at his house, and he had actually typed up. He had over the years, he had hand typed all the turtles that he had sold and how much for, going back to like the early 90s. And in the early days, he was selling them to the person who's taking them off island and selling them to whatever market. He was getting paid, I don't know, 50 cents or $1 or a couple dollars, and it goes up to $5, and then by the early 2000s, if you could even find one, you were getting, several $100s for it from the collector's end. But then they were all gone, and so they were described in '94. Okay, here's a new species, even though we already have it and people are breeding them. Then there was this mad, of course, drive, and in 5 years, the rest of them were gone. But it was rather easy to collect them out. We know that there's the snakeheads that are probably eating all the babies, but the adults in the seasonal wetlands, they estivate. These wetlands dry out. It's just like here in chicken turtles in a way. They're estivating, they're buried on the edges, and when the rains come back and fill the pools, they go back into the water. So you just go around along with a probe, in the dry season and find them.
Right, their ecologies sort of make it not in their favor when humans get involved. And
yeah,
there was a traffic report that came out a while back that I remember reading through. And it was saying some of these guys in the mid 80s period in the course of 2 to 3 days could pull out 300 plus and just decimate the population in a decade or so.
Yeah.
That's
in 19, probably up until 85, 90, around 90, there are probably still a lot left, that you could probably go out in those lakes and they're filled with them, but, or at least, relatively filled with them. And now they're all gone.
They're a lot in captivity now too. But what do you think about kind of the having them in captivity? But if they're no longer in the wild, sort of what is it? Is that a benefit, or what is the benefit to captive assurance colonies? I guess.
Well, it's the idea that it's a bank. It's a living genetic bank of these species. So, like right now, as we speak, the reintroduction process is underway. Animals have already been sent from the U.S. to Singapore, and there's a facility on Timor. They've identified a lake that they want to protect. I mean, they're still they got to raise them up so they don't fit in the fish in the mouths of the fish. But yeah, I mean, they're on the verge of putting them back out into the wild from captive bred animals. So hopefully that's a successful project, like other projects that we've seen, such as the Burmese star tortoise. Is obviously a completely different situation, an animal altogether, but still something that wouldn't it be great to see 5,000, even 1,000 McCordai back out in the wild on Rhode Island? I mean, that would be great. And stop the collection, educate the locals, have someone there that's working on them, that's being a champion for them, and yeah, we're trying to drive ourselves out of business here, man. We don't want to have to keep all populations of these turtles. I want to go to Rhode Island. I want to go to Vietnam and see these turtles like we go and see turtles here. But that's just my selfish take on life. I want to be able to see turtles and crocodiles in the wild. We want them in the wild, but that is the whole point of the assurance colonies. To have those options, creating, preserving these options for the future. And it's difficult because, some of them may never get back in the wild. It may take 100 years. It may take 500 years, or it may take 5 or 10 years. But it also depends on culture and what what society as a whole, as a global society, what happens, because it's not, obviously it's not looking that great. But it hasn't been for a long time. So we have little wins here and there, but overall, we're still seeing this great decline of all biodiversity and life in general, other than humans and mosquitoes and cockroaches and red-eared sliders.
Yeah.
It's kind of. Oh, no, you're going.
Yeah, go ahead.
No. So I was going. Why? In your experience, why are the turtles so good at finding whatever they're looking for, like just anywhere, like in Southeast Asia, that like way better than the biologists seem to be able to find them, and just insane numbers of species that should be able to find.
Yeah.
Like, what is going on?
Well, I'd say particular for the most part, it's familiarity. It's you come here, you want to go see river cooters, you want to see spotted turtles, you want to catch a snapping turtle, I'll take you and do it. We'll go do it, and most likely we'll be successful. But these people live there. This is their home. They're hunted. I mean, they grew up in these forests. And a lot of them have lived off of these forests. They know where everything is. It's they know how. It's just being familiar with your environment, I think, and people that are professionals, just like professional hunters that live anywhere right here. They know how to track things. They know how to find things. They learn about the animal's natural history and ecology at whatever level that is, to know the animal's behaviors and where to find them. And I think that's what it is. Like, I think if you went and flew to whatever country and spent 5 years there just doing that, yeah, you would know where to find it all. I think that's what it really boils down to. And, as foreigners, we drop in, we fly in somewhere like, oh, I want to see these turtles, It's like, someone or you come here and start walking through people's yards in South Carolina looking for spotted turtles, you're going to get shot, But it's kind of the same way there. You're walking through people's fields, their agricultural fields. You have to find people that generally, unless you're, they have things set up differently. But usually these areas where these turtles are found are somebody's property, and they're managing it in some way. And you need permission to go on their property and do this stuff. So you enlist their help.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see too in different areas how different senses kind of get developed. I spent some time in Belize this summer and at the Be Free station out there, and a lot of the folks that work there just are so in tune with that environment that me coming from the United States, just a lot of my senses are attuned to different things. Like we were walking through the bush, or I guess the jungle there, and we're all of a sudden it was Tom who was in front of me, and all of a sudden you hear it. I didn't hear anything, and he turns around, he said stop, and he points up about 200 feet and shines a flashlight, and the eyes of a kinkajou were up on a branch. And I'm just thinking, that's incredible. I would have no idea that was there. And he said that he heard a twig snap and knew that it came from just that development of that sort of sense is not something, it's location specific. And I'm sure it's very different in Asia than it in even just in Indonesia than it is in different areas. So yeah, in tune with those things. Right?
Yes, I agree.
Well, and so another one that is kind of cool, talking about the travels, I guess that's sort of the theme, is all these different travels. We haven't really spoken much about this, but was the Palawan crisis in 2015. I remember I was a lot younger, but it doesn't even, for me, it doesn't even feel like that long ago. But this was something cool to see. And you were there. So what was that experience like? When you initially heard about this, what was kind of going through your head? And
well, I heard about it. When I initially heard about it, I was just like, holy shit, that's a lot of latensis, I mean, just the numbers were staggering. I mean, that's the first thing that comes to mind, obviously, and just a shame, all these animals piled up over, a 6-month period of time in the cement bunker, a turtle that until 14 years prior to that, we knew from 4 specimens. We had no idea where it really came from. It was just this mystery turtle. What is this thing? Where does it come from? And then all of a sudden, there they are, and and of course, they were rediscovered, or they were discovered where they came from in 2001, I believe, or 2001, I think it was, and found, of course, in a restaurant in Puerto Princesa, the main town of Palawan, and and then they found it, on the island, and then during that time, it was all kind of kept under wraps and pretty secretive. But during that time, all these animals collected, and as soon as they were kind of rediscovered, they start showing up in Japan and China, Europe, the U.S., and luckily not tons of them, but you saw that if those turtles would have made it off island, most of them would have died, of course, but it's like 3,000 or whatever it was, 4,000 turtles, pumped into the trade. And, a lot of them would go into Chinese turtle farms, them trying to breed them and just putting them out in turtle ponds, and a lot of them dying, or most of them dying. Someone just actually sent me, Clint, I think through Steve Platt, sent him a picture of one that was found in Singapore. And we just identified, that's a latensis. Yeah, just this past week.
No, it was something in the wild, just that was released.
Yeah, I believe so. I don't know the story if it was found, if someone had it, or if it was found, or I don't know the backstory on it. I just know it was in Singapore, and Steve Platt sent the photo asking for verification of ID.
Is the trade? Well, I guess we probably don't know, but do you know if the trade, what the latest is with the trade of the forest turtles? Is it
this? I mean, there's no legal trade at all. All the trade that has come out have been laundered animals through like some of the zoos in the Philippines, saying they're captive bred. But they might be captive. They're not. There's hatchlings picked up, and they say that they're captive bred, and they send them to Hong Kong or China or Japan or whatever, or wherever. So there's not any legal trade at all. They shouldn't be leaving that island, just like Geomaya japonica. They've been protected since like 1974 in that country, or earlier than that. Every single one of them left that country illegally.
Right.
Even though there's paperwork for about 30 of them, import paperwork in the U.S. With U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but that's it. And I would say there's more like 150 or 200 that have probably come in over the past couple of decades.
Yeah, the enforcement on the exporting country side too. Imagine that matters a lot, and that's sort of lacking in a lot of these areas. I think a lot of that. I mean, I don't know what your take on this is, but I imagine a lot of that's just due to sort of top-down issues. If there's not really a government that is cohesive from the top sort of down, you have a lot of these issues fall through the cracks. And conservation, a lot of times.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Conservation kind of comes later on in terms of other issues, so little gets devoted to it.
And there's just lots of corruption too, and bribery, and most people who care. Most people don't care about turtles. It's not on the forefront of their mind. I mean, if you think about it. I mean, how many people in the world are as devoted to turtles as people like us are? Very, very few, unfortunately. Like everyone likes turtles. Everyone has a turtle story. Everyone's like, oh, turtles are cool. A lot of people say, oh, I'm devoted to turtles. I love turtles, but no one really does anything about it. They don't really know anything about turtles. They don't go out and advocate for turtles. They just love turtles because turtles are cool, but that's about it. They're not going to intentionally hurt them, but they're also not going to necessarily do anything about it either. But yeah, Palawan, that was I've gone there before. I went there in 2012. I was in the Philippines for the Croc meetings in Manila, and I took a side trip and met up with Sabine and went out, and I think was one of the first foreigners, outsiders, that they took out into the field, and I got to see them in the wild. We caught a whole bunch one night and collected data on them, and it was just wonderful. It was like one of the greatest things in the world, like a truly nocturnal turtle. And sitting, she has a few at home too, and we're just like sitting out on her porch and having a drink, and as soon as the sun goes down, you hear them plopping in the water. They're in their little hides during the day, and they plop down in the water. And these turtles that live in these streams, and they make these burrows into the bank, and they like communally go into these like side burrows. I mean, they're just such a neat little turtle. Yeah.
Go ahead, Jack.
Something a little off topic. You can.
Well, I was sort of curious, just the adventure aspect. What's been your most exhilarating experience in the field?
Most exhilarating. Oh, geez. Wow.
Yeah, that one might take a second, but
there's so many, I assume, but
that sort of comes with the traveling biologist territory, I guess.
Yeah, there's exhilarating where there's like near death exhilarating experiences. There's like, dodging abductions, kind of exhilarating. There's in East Timor. The first time I went to East Timor in 2004, I think it was. It's 2002, I believe. Well, whatever. It was early 2000s. I have to look it up. I can't remember. I get some dates mixed up sometimes. I'm usually pretty good, but I think it's 2000. I want to say 2003 or 4. I mean, anyway, it's not long out. I mean, they were at war. I mean, there were still, UNICEF tents everywhere. People living in tents. Everything was a mess. And while I was there, got trapped under gunfire. I mean, some skirmish, some stuff broke out and gunfire going on. And so the airport was closed down. I couldn't get out for a few days. And it was basically just like holed up in the hotel where I was in Dili until things cooled down a little bit.
That's pretty scary. Similar almost. It's like a higher order issue that when we were talking to, I think it was John Can on one of the past episodes. He was saying how he got caught in arrow fire. In New Guinea, they were running down a hill all of a sudden and shooting arrows over the head. But that's a little bit. I don't know. Both situations are a little bit nerve wracking. But
New Guinea is kind of nerve wracking just because you're always stuck in the mud. I was in 2006 on an expedition for a few weeks, going up along the Irian Jaya PNG border, and we're looking for Alceas and Rhymonite type snake necks, and we're just always stuck in the mud, and breaking down and just like. But you're stuck, and I start walking around in the jungle, and I'm seeing like death adders and monitor lizards and amnestine pythons and all kinds of cool stuff like that. But at the same time, you're just kind of stuck in the middle of Papua New Guinea in the jungle, and it's raining all the time and muddy as hell. And we picked up. I remember that particular trip. We picked up a woman and her son who was dying from malaria, and we're trying to get him to town, which is really only about 60 miles away, but it took us 3 days to get through those 60 miles in a 4-wheel drive vehicle, just being constantly stuck, and other people being stuck too. There'd be jam ups of trucks and vehicles and mud, like 15, 20 feet high, and just hundreds of people, building things to like get these cars and things through. It was just, and you'd be there all day dealing with that, or half the day, often. And so, and then picking things. Somehow I've never really gotten sick when everyone else around me gets malaria and dengue and food poisoning and giardia. And my friend with me on that New Guinea trip, he's an ornithologist, and he just wanted to tag along. And God, he was just so sick the whole time with giardia. We're just like sleeping in the woods and getting chewed up by so many different kinds of insects, just bloodied and welts everywhere. Yeah, sometimes it's not all that pleasant.
Yeah, that's people. Yeah, that's the part of it that the exploration is fun, but there's always, well, I mean, I guess a lot of times the sickness is the issue. That's really lucky if that's not a problem that you have. If you've got a pretty
but when it catches up with me, it's probably not going to be good, because I've somehow dodged it, and I've never taken any anti-malarias or vaccines for specific trips or anything. I've just gone in and somehow not died each time. And I probably have parasites, there's probably some worms rolling around in me, but other than that, I've been okay so far.
The only place I've been was Ecuador and the Galapagos, so that's relatively tame compared to some of the places Michael's been in, what you're talking about. So all these horror stories, it's like I'm just to get prepared for when I finally do start traveling to some of them.
The most dangerous country I've ever been to is the United States of America. I mean, I've been held up at gunpoint multiple times in this country. I've never, really felt like I was about to die other than in this country.
Jeez.
Well, on airplanes a few times, when in severe turbulence, dropping out of the sky. I've had some rough ones with that too.
Question about the Dogania. You said you were finding them in the Danube Valley. What is it like to look for that species? Like
going up in the just going up in streams. I guess it was in Sabah. I was in the Danube Valley. I think they are there. I don't know if they're. I'm not sure if the range goes all the way down there, but we were looking for Minoria there. Didn't find any, unfortunately. Did see Asian elephants though in Borneo, but no, hiking up streams in the mountains, and they're just in these little streams, these little hill streams. Yeah, they're well. I actually did not find any myself personally, but other people that we were with did. But it was, it's always the experience hiking through the jungle. Borneo is a neat place, I tell you. It's like, ever since I was a kid, just growing up, just thinking about, I've just always been fascinated by that Malay Indo, archipelago and the biodiversity throughout that place. And also the Amazon and the Congo Basin too. Just those big giant tropical belts have always interested me, but Indonesia, Malaysia has been the one that I've always really been interested. I think it's also because of the cultures there, the hundreds and hundreds of languages that are spoke, the cannibalism, the head hunting, all that cool stuff. Just watching those old documentaries from the 60s and 70s of going in there, just always fascinated me.
It's exciting. It's definitely a foreign, sort of being here, and just, it's hard to actually being in a place is very different than imagining it. You get to sense so much more, and it's to some extent. The turtles are obviously sort of the motivation, but there's also some level of it satisfies that want for adventure. I feel like that's also an interest a lot of us have.
Yeah. Discovering and being a 17th century explorer. That would have been awesome. That's what that's kind of just fulfilling that kind of desire. That's I started doing that in my 20s, and actually going and doing. I always wanted to do it, and I finally did it, and I still do it to this day as much as possible.
Right, and that sort of thing was only a matter of a few hundred years ago, and it seems from our perspective now, it seems we've learned so much that there is still, it will be a 17th century explorer to someone in 400 years. So it's sort of perspective based, but
just the past 20 to 30 years, think about all we've learned about turtles. 20 to 30 years ago, we knew virtually nothing about a lot of these species. When I was a teenager, there were 275 species of turtles. Now there are 350 to 60, and again, as we've discussed, a lot of that's based on genetics and little stuff, but still, it's allowing. We've just learned so much more about a lot of these species, and then there are some we still know absolutely nothing about. Of course, a lot of them, really, unfortunately.
Right. Even the two we spoke most about today, the Rhode Island snakeneck and the forest turtles, that's a perfect example. Didn't even know that they existed in that period of time. But we can start sort of, we can shift focus a little, I think, maybe to the Turtle Survival Center and kind of the stuff on the captive front there. And sort of wrap up with that. But I'm sort of curious, what are the things, I guess in the past, I think a lot of listeners follow a lot of the stuff that happens at the TSC, sort of naturally being involved. But what are some of the highlights in the history of the center, I guess, in terms of breeding and other sort of groundbreaking things? And then also, what are some upcoming projects that you're sort of interested in tackling?
Well, I guess I think the most exciting thing is just how quickly we were able to kind of get this off the ground and get in animals, the success of the breeding with a lot of the species here. Every species that we keep here, we breed, other than the exception is that we have adult at least pairs of. The only exception being Hyosomes depressa. We have never had, in fact, that last year, 2022, was the first year that we got eggs from the pair that we have here. But other, the success of breeding, we've hatched over 800, turtles now, endangered and critically endangered turtles, in the past 10 years, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, except when you consider most of these turtles lay 1 or 2 or 3 eggs at a time, and usually one time you get one chance a year. You have low fertility with some of these species for whatever reason. A lot of these animals have been through a lot of the animals, the adult breeding animals here at the TSC. A lot of them are old refugees from the old pet trade. They've been in this country for 20, 30 plus years. They've been around for a long time. Some of them are old and geriatric, and most of them are at least 30 or 40, because most of them have been around at least since 2000, and a lot of them earlier than that. So the fact that we have these nice little populations here, they've really settled in, they're acclimated, they're breeding. We're constantly having catching up to build new enclosures for them, of course, and for offspring as they grow up. We're successful. We're raising offspring. We just finished a building for juvenile rearing. We can now manage a few hundred juveniles as we're raising them. But then they're going to become adults. So we're going to have these adult F1 and F2 populations, and we need to build outdoor enclosures for all of them too. Not all of them, but a certain number of them to meet our population goals, to maintain a 95% plus genetic diversity over 100 or more years. Of course, with some species, there are very few individuals left, and you just have to work with what you have and hope for the best. For the future, there's we have this training course. We hope to be fostering the next generation of turtle conservation biologists. A lot of people are getting older. There doesn't seem to be, there are young people around, of course, like yourselves, but that are interested in this stuff. But by and large, there aren't a lot to it. And more to focus on turtle. There are lots of people studying turtles, but very, very few people are studying turtles of the world. They're really into global turtle diversity. A lot of people, hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of people probably, are doing their master's degree, their PhD. They're studying one species or one aspect of one species, or the species is just part of their, not their main focus of their project. Or they're studying a region, But like I said, the global, the Peter Pritchards, the Peter Paul Van Dykes, the people that are really, looking all over the world. Peter Proshog, there's not many people around that can sit around and have a conversation about, most species of turtles in the world.
Right. Yeah. It does seem like a lot of people, even in our experience interviewing for people for the podcast, it is pretty specific. Just kind of the expertise is, but yeah, that's an interesting perspective to have, working with so many things. And I imagine you have to deal with a lot of sort of issues and other things. Is there anything that was sort of an issue and has been overcome that was kind of a highlight, I guess, and
I will say, just backing up real quickly, one other, as far as breeding, like everything we have here, we're breeding. There was one I forgot about that we hope to be, is the our only U.S. species, the flattened musk turtle. We have the only pair in the AZA. We have been working for the past few years trying to develop an assurance colony program with the state of Alabama, with the federal government, to have that assurance colony with individuals that can be plucked out of the trade, or the remaining individuals that are in little creeks here and there, that there might only be 1 or 2 or 3 individuals left in. anyway, we're trying to form, a program for that, build a facility specific for that species. But right now we're just, we're trying to breed them. This will be our first full year of having this pair here. So hopefully this spring we will have, or this summer we'll have eggs cooking. So that's one other big kind of for husbandry projects in the future, that we're looking at happening. And back to your newest question. I'm sorry. Will you please repeat it?
Yeah, just in terms of, I guess for people that keeping turtles, it might be interesting there's a lot of turtles are pretty hardy in a lot of ways, but they're also prone to different issues. If there's something that you found that works really well for fixing some specific issue.
I think the reality of that is when you have hundreds of animals, there's always going to be something you got to deal with, injuries. Right. Pathogens. I mean, no place is sterile. There's really no such thing as pure biosecurity, when you're keeping wildlife. And where we live in a city, we're trying to provide these animals with a semi-natural environment outdoors, those that are temperate species and can live outdoors year round. And so you're exposed to things. And so you're always having to keep up with disease testing, really monitoring animals. But a lot of these animals are established and they're settled and they're acclimated, and you keep them under optimal conditions. They tend to do quite well. But yeah, you're always going to have little things, and you'll never be able to fully overcome, parasites and viruses, and it's there. It's in the environment. Animals have even if you kept them in lines of 10-gallon aquariums and on newspaper, and nothing else, you're still going to have stuff happen, and then they're going to be living a much more miserable existence than being outdoors and having a pool to run around in.
I think we've all been to the TSC too, and like the standard that you guys have with it is incredible. I mean, the enclosures are just, in terms of mimicking the natural environment, I think it's as close as you can get. I mean, you would know that more than anyone, how close those things match and kind of the work that you do to detail that, right?
Yeah. Well, when you're talking about a 3 by 6 foot area or so, there's only so much you can do. I mean, it'd be nice to build a giant flowing stream for each individual, that's 20 feet long, and for things for stream dwelling species. But you try to move the water, you try to aerate water, you try to push water around, so you get that kind of stream feeling when you're in the water, and you do the best that you can, and there are obviously limited resources. That's why we focus on the species that we focus on. We try to pick ones we definitely pick ones that are in need of captive management, that, not everyone, there's not really successful programs for other places, because there are such limited resources. Why duplicate efforts? And not in sharing this. I mean, the TSA has always been built on partnerships. Obviously, no one can do all this stuff on their own. It's everyone working together, and piecing it together. So there's this greater collective force that's trying to keep these things from going extinct.
Yeah, that's well said, I think. So I guess we can sort of wrap it up. I've got one particular question too. I was pretty curious with, because this is one of the things that floats a lot around online and this sort of thing. I don't know. Most of us aren't keeping many turtles now, but we have in the past. But with shell rot, sometimes that's something that people see a lot, and there are a lot of alternative ways that people claim works to fix it. I'm curious what works best in your experience, like what sort of treatment regime?
Yeah, I think it depends on the species and how bad it is, and what is causing it. Is it fungal? Is it bacterial? Is it both? So A lot of times, just debriding the area, getting all the active kind of like cheesy abscess material out, cleaning it real well, keeping it dry, keeping it clean, putting topicals on it, whether that be, ceftazidime or I'm sorry, silver sulfite. And salt baths work really good for a lot of species and helping with that. It really depends on a lot of different things, and it's a battle, of course, and certain species are much more susceptible to water quality and shell disease than others, and some are chronic. So you'll find individuals that get it time and time again, no matter seemingly what you do for them, and they heal up and they do fine. They're fine for 6 months, a year, 2 years, and then it comes back again someplace else. And if it's one of those, occasionally it's hidden, you don't see it, it's under the scoot and you don't notice it, and it's gotten, sometimes it becomes really extensive and really deep, and then you're in a real battle there when you find them like that. And sometimes you put them under a CT scanner or an X-ray, and they're basically Swiss cheese, but you look at them from the outside and you don't see that. It's all covered up by their scoots. So yeah, I mean, there isn't like any one thing. You just have to tackle each one case by case as it comes along. Sometimes it's real easy. Just a matter of some salt baths, some betadine scrubs, keeping them dry and let it heal up, and then get them back out. Being outside is a really good thing. UV, as we all know, UV radiation helps out with a lot of this stuff. If they can get dry out and bask and get heated up.
Which of those species are super prone to developing it extensively, like under the scoots? Is that like mostly Coras and Asian turtles?
We've seen it with some Cora. I actually currently have a Pelusios gabonensis at home that has had that happen a few weeks ago that I'm treating at home. Snail-eating turtles are really prone to it. Cicalia are prone to a lot of shell disease. Graptomes, another one. What else? I mean, that's off the top of my head. One thing, I'm sure there are other soft shell turtles. Actually, a lot of them, end up with shell disease if they're not in good quality conditions.
Soft shells are strange too, because it seems like, at least in California with the spiny soft shells that have been introduced, you'll find them in some of the nastiest water that humans wouldn't even dare go into. Yeah. So it seems like, that's another interesting
turtles seem to like, I don't say dirty water, but murky water. I mean, they, a lot of them do.
Right. All right. Well, I think we've covered a lot of things, and we can start to wrap up here. So this is our first time back in a while, but I forgot to mention to you, but we like to, at the end of the show, do a little trivia section thing where we can do it multiple ways. You could just ask us a series of turtle questions, or we could do a volley back and forth. We could hit you with some, and you could hit us with some. Or normally I like to tell people in advance, but I forgot. And just so you can come up with something, but I don't know if you've got stuff on top of your head.
Let's see. Yes, I can shoot. Yeah, we can shoot a couple back and forth. Let's see. Let's see. How about what is the only documented endemic turtle to Papua New Guinea?
Just
That's a good.
I'm still thinking on that one.
No, don't look at your phones.
No,
are you? Okay, so we're not. Irian Jaya doesn't count, or
no. I'm talking about the country of Papua New Guinea.
Just Papua New Guinea. Okay.
Yeah. Not New Guinea, not the island New Guinea, but Papua New Guinea.
Right. I've got an idea, but yeah, I can think of one that is objectively works.
Okay.
CheloniaCast Pritchardi.
That's it. You got it.
I had a different
Yep.
one in mind. I was wrong.
I was just kind of thinking about it, but that's a great question actually, because there's so many things that you think, oh yeah, and then the border kind of gets in the way.
Yeah.
That's
Now,
that,
someday when extensive work is actually done on that entire island, I would assume there'll be others. I mean, there's a lot to still discover on that island, I think.
right, and even the Pritchard Eyes, not well known.
No, not at all.
So,
Not at all. No, there's only one in this country that I'm aware of. I've actually seen them in person. It's one of my holy grails to go see in the wild. Right.
That's that whole area of sort of western or eastern New Guinea. That's really an interesting area.
Yeah.
All right, if you've got another one, or we could throw in your way, or if you want to just do us, it works.
No, yeah. You ask me one, see if I can get one.
All right. Okay. I was thinking of one, but if you guys, Jason, Jack, you got something first, we could save mine for later.
I'll let you go first.
Question,
or no,
Jason,
go ahead.
Jason, you go.
Oh, a bit of a primate question, Turtle. What's the common name for the genus Propithecus?
The genus what? I'm sorry. You broke out.
Propithecus.
Propithecus.
Yeah, it's a primate genus. The common name they called.
Oh, geez.
We've gone outside the range of turtles, but I guess this worked.
Yeah, I mean, the best one maybe proboscis monkeys.
There's
I don't know.
Siphacas.
They're what?
They're called Siphacas. So
okay, well, yeah, you got me on that one. Yeah, you're going out of my realm there.
I thought you knew the criteria, Jason. We stick with turtles, but that works. That's funny.
Yeah, I'm taking a primate ecology and conservation course. That's kind of what my mind's been here the last.
Well, it's all fresh on your mind, then. Yeah, and then in 10 years it'll all float away. Unfortunately.
Yeah. All right, Chris, if you want to hit us with another one, well, we can do one more little round.
I got one more.
Okay.
Okay.
If you want to hit us with one first, unless.
No, go ahead.
All right.
Go. Go.
This is like a turtles of the world question, so not including sea turtles, and this includes like subspecies. Which turtle has the smallest range of any turtle, and then which one has the broadest, not including sea turtles? No.
The broadest range I would think would be Cora amboinensis. I think. I mean, they're going to be split into multiple species sometime soon, so that will take that away. But I mean, they occur from India to Timor. I don't know that anything else that has that big of a range. And then the smallest range turtle, holy cow. And you're talking about subspecies too, right?
Well, yeah.
Because there's a subspecies.
Well, technically it's a species. So if we're not including subspecies, it's still.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say I know there's a subspecies of Emys orbicularis that just occurs in like one tiny place. And we're talking.
I'm curious. I wanted to find something here. Is it historic? Like, what's the bound on range? Is it current?
Currently occupied.
Currently
in square
occupied range.
kilometers. Like in square kilometers. Like total landmass occupied. Sorry, this probably shouldn't have. It's a little too complex.
Yeah.
I think I should have asked.
So probably I'm thinking potentially one of the South African tortoises, like maybe the geometric tortoise or the what's that one padloper called? I'm not thinking of that Homopus. I think it's one of them, but I don't know for sure. You might have got me on that one. I don't know.
I recently read it was the IUCN Turtles of the World book, so they had all these statistics in there.
Yeah.
And I was surprised by both of the answers. Apparently, the scorpion mud turtle has the broadest range.
Okay.
Of any turtle besides a sea turtle, it's like 7.4 million, and the smallest was the Duncan Island tortoise from the Galapagos.
Right, of course.
because
Galapagos.
it only occurs on.
Yes.
And that one's kind of tricky though because of those
Yeah, right.
That was kind of that's why I was like, oh shoot, I should have specified. But
yeah. Okay. I'm surprised that Scorpioides has a larger range than Amboinensis, but
I think it's because of maybe it's the land occupied and not necessarily maybe if it was just like the space, like the distance from including like non-occupied area, probably the Amboinensis then. I mean, they're huge range.
Yes. All right. Okay.
All right, we can do one more here, I guess.
I'll give you guys one. I'll give you guys one, right? How about well, as far as we know, how many species can you name that have, as far as we know, never been seen by a biologist, a turtle person, other than obviously the local people? I can think of a few.
Okay, I can think of this is
I'm sorry, in the wild. In the wild, not in captivity.
I think I might have one.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. I got another one. So,
Michael, I don't know if this is confident with this, but maybe the Joe's box turtle, one of the Kokura. Okay,
That's one.
Yeah,
McCord's box turtle that I know of hasn't been found.
That is correct. McCord's box turtle. Can you think of two more? Two more that I know of that are recently, relatively recently described within the past. One of them actually, like 10 or 12 or more years ago, and the other one, like 5 or 6 years ago, 4 or 5 maybe.
Okay, this was really recently. Yeah, that's kind of a tough one. My mind is going immediately to Asia for this because that's sort of what
same.
you would expect. Yeah, thinking out loud is sort of tough too. But I think we've maxed out the Koura. All the other Koura have been found. So
that is correct. Those are the two Koura that have not been seen in the wild.
Right.
By outsiders.
Recently, New Guinea stuff has been found.
You're onto something there.
Oh, okay.
Both of these turtles have the same species name. I'll tell you that. But they're two different genera, but both have the same species name.
This is okay.
Is it
no?
Chelonia's and McCordy?
No, I think I have.
No,
we were already there, Jason.
Oh, gotcha.
We already got
my bad. I'm like steps behind everyone. He's the two species name.
So you said two different genre?
No, that was valid though.
Two different genera, but the
same name.
Is the same, yeah, and not McCordy, no.
And they've been described recently.
I don't know.
One of them was described probably about 2007 or 6, and one was a few years ago.
The Emidura and Elsaya, those two genera?
Emidura is one. Emidura gunaleni and Chelonia's gunaleni. Emidura gunaleni is the black Emidura from the Bird's Head Peninsula and Irian Jaya far west, and then the Chelonia's gunaleni is from the Tamika region along the southwestern coast of Papua New Guinea.
Right.
New Guinea, of Irian Jaya, not of New Guinea itself. Yeah.
And those are just from captive specimens then.
Those were collected by somebody in the wild, like some local collector collected them. But no one has gone there and looked at them as far as I know. No turtle person or biologist or even Indonesian biologist, as far as I know, no one has gone there and actually looked at them.
That's
Yeah.
those are
Yeah.
interesting. The Emidura gunulina are they're like a black version of the subglobosa almost.
And they have nice little thin yellow lines on their sides of their head, and they're all black. Yeah, they're neat looking.
Yeah, those are some interesting turtles.
I'll give you
All
one
right.
more. You guys can get this. What's the southernmost occurring turtle on the planet? Other than outside of the 7 marine species. We're always excluding the marine species.
Extant?
Yes, extant.
All right. Some stuff in Antarctica, but it's dead. That's actually a good question.
There can't be that many options.
There are not that many options.
Southernmost. Yeah, I have an idea, but I'm trying to think about this a little bit more. It's actually a tough question because it kind of points to the lack of specific geographical knowledge of latitude.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's that too.
From Australia.
I don't think that there's anything that could be more south than what I'm thinking of, but
What do you got?
Chaco tortoise.
That's it. Yeah. What about freshwater?
Okay, that's
I wasn't even. I was thinking
maybe scorpion mud turtle actually, because if they
Chaco
go that
tortoise is the I believe is the lowest latitude in south, down into way down into Argentina, and then in a fairly close second and third is CheloniaCast longicollis and Emidura macquarie, right down there in Melbourne, Australia, just a few degrees above that. Yeah.
Species, but I wasn't confident. But
and if longicollis, it's presumed that they were translocated or introduced to Tasmania, that northern end of Tasmania. But if not, that would make them really the lowest, or probably at a tie with Chilensis.
Those are
all right. Well, that's
questions.
Yeah, those are some great questions, and impressive too that you came up with them that fast. A lot of people in the past, it's been tough because you ask them and it's just on the spot. That's why I started doing it prior to that. But yeah, thank you.
Well, there's a turtle,
right.
so we kind of do this stuff all the time. I don't know.
Yeah, right. It's also we like to I guess we like to test our knowledge too.
Yeah.
It's sort of a fun
Oh,
thing.
of course.
Not many other spots to do it. But all right, well, thank you, Chris, for coming on today.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, been a pleasure to talk with you, and looking forward to seeing you at the TSA meeting and future events.
In August, you going to come in August?
Yep.
August? Yep, we'll be here.
I'll be there.
Excellent. We'll see you then.
All right.
Cool.
All right, for everyone out there, this is, I guess, episode 31, beginning of season 2. It's exciting, and yeah, if you guys are listening and interested, the Turtle Survival Alliance, the annual symposium on the conservation biology of tortoises and freshwater turtles is going to be held in August in South Carolina. So definitely look into that. And you can find the Turtle Survival Alliance online. We'll put a link to their website below, and definitely go and support them. They're doing some incredible work. So we will see you all later.